Every great courtroom drama doesn't start with a crime, it starts with an assumption, an idea, unchecked and unchallenged, that grows powerful in the hands of those who believe their instincts outweigh the truth. That's exactly how this story begins, with a single, careless call, a vague description, and a cop too eager to act. This isn't a story just about one wrongful arrest. It's a reflection of something far bigger, a system where appearance becomes suspicion, and authority is misused not out of duty, but out of unchecked ego. But as you'll see, the woman they thought was just another face in the crowd. She wasn't just innocent, she was justice itself in disguise, and when the courtroom doors finally opened, the real story began. The arrest built on assumption. It started with a call, anonymous, vague, and laced with subtle prejudice. Suspicious black woman loitering near the federal courthouse. The dispatcher relayed. Officer Travis Dalton, sitting behind the wheel of his patrol car, tightened his jaw. He didn't ask for further details. He didn't need to. In his mind, the image had already formed. Black alone must be trouble. Speeding through Ashburn's Central District, Travis spotted a woman standing near the courthouse parking lot. Professional, poised, sipping coffee. He didn't care about her calm demeanor or her tailored suit. All he saw was someone who fit the description. Without a second of genuine inquiry, he approached. "Let me see your ID," he demanded. When she raised an eyebrow in confusion, he saw defiance. Her silence was interpreted as guilt, and just like that, he slapped on the cuffs. A bystander gasped, but Travis ignored it. He believed he'd just prevented something dangerous, but in reality, he had just ignited something far more explosive. Calm within chaos, even as the cold metal of the handcuffs dug into her wrists, Maya Franklin didn't lose her composure. Her breaths were steady, her eyes didn't flinch. She didn't scream or plead, she observed. She had spent years in federal courtrooms, dissecting moments like this with legal precision. Now she was living one. Travis barked orders as if handling a threat. Maya, dignified and sharp, complied with quiet grace. She knew the law better than he ever would, but she also knew this wasn't the time to correct him. "Not yet. You're making a mistake," she said softly, but he didn't hear her words, only the tone he chose to interpret as smugness. To him, she was just another resister, but to Maya, every second was evidence building for a bigger case. In the back seat of the cruiser, she looked out at the courthouse she'd walked into 100 times. Today, she was going back, not as a prosecutor, but as a target of the very system she worked to uphold, and it wasn't over, not even close. Warnings ignored, ego engaged back at the precinct. Murmurs floated through the station like storm clouds before rain. Rookie officers glanced at each other, uncertain. One of them, Officer Diaz, approached Travis cautiously, holding a tablet. "Hey, I think you might have brought in Maya Franklin," he whispered. "She's not just anyone, she's a federal prosecutor." Travis scoffed. "And I'm the president," he said with a laugh, brushing him off. He didn't even look at the screen. To him, it was just another attempt to challenge his authority. A woman with poise didn't mean she had power. Not in his world. He doubled down, convinced that letting her go now would make him look weak. He had arrested too many for less. He wasn't going to backtrack. Not for her, not for anyone. But the warning signs were there. Emails pinged, names popped up on interdepartmental alerts. Still, Travis moved forward with charges, blind to the tidal wave about to crash down on him. All because of a bruised ego disguised as procedure. The reveal in the courtroom buzzed with routine chatter until Maya was escorted in. Heads turned. Something about her presence, the quiet confidence, the sharp eyes, felt out of place for someone accused of loitering. The clerk fumbled over her name, Maya Franklin. She stepped forward and gently placed a card onto the judge's bench. Judge Havorson glanced at it, then did a double take. The courtroom froze. The name stared back at him in bold print. Assistant U.S. Attorney, Eastern District of Virginia. Gasps broke the silence. "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice calm and clear, "I was unlawfully detained without cause. I am a federal prosecutor here on official assignment." Travis stood frozen, eyes wide, as the reality crashed down on him. The judge turned red with disbelief. This is outrageous. In one instant the tables had turned. The accused became the authority, and the courtroom shifted from routine proceedings to the site of a professional reckoning. Justice had just arrived, in heels and handcuffs. Power revealed, silence echoed, the courtroom held its breath. Even the stenographer paused mid-keystroke. Travis's badge seemed to shrink on his chest as Maya stood tall, her credentials now displayed like a sword in a duel. She didn't gloat, she didn't raise her voice, she simply let the weight of truth settle into the room. I've spent over a decade prosecuting federal crimes. I'm currently leading 2 corruption cases tied to this very district. She said, eyes locked on the judge, but loud enough for every reporter in the gallery to hear. Travis's mouth twitched. He looked around for support, but no one met his gaze. Maya continued, and today I was profiled, arrested without just cause, and paraded into this courtroom by an officer who didn't ask, didn't listen, and didn't care to check facts. Her words weren't just for justice. They were a scalpel slicing through the thick fabric of systemic arrogance. Everyone knew this was no longer a simple case. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Dismissed with a gavel's thunder, Judge Havorson, a man rarely rattled, leaned forward with visible agitation. He tapped the prosecutor's business card against the bench, his jaw tense. "This is a disgrace," he muttered, eyes now burning into Officer Dalton. He raised his gavel. "All charges are not only dismissed, they never should have been brought to begin with. This court is not a playground for bias or baseless arrests." The gavel came down with a thunderous crack, as if echoing Maya's silent vindication. In the gallery, whispers erupted. Journalists rushed out to file breaking updates. Travis tried to speak, but the judge cut him off. "You're lucky she's not pressing charges yet." Maya didn't even look at him. Her composure was a statement all on its own. In that moment, justice wasn't just served, it was personified. She didn't have to shout, threaten, or retaliate. All it took was her presence, her credentials, and the undeniable truth. Travis had brought the wrong woman to court, and the courtroom would never forget it. Media firestorm ignites within hours. The courthouse steps transformed into a media frenzy. Cameras flashed like lightning, reporters shoved microphones forward, and news vans lined the street like war wagons. The headline wrote itself, "Federal Prosecutor Wrongfully Arrested by Local Cop. Justice Turns Tables." Footage of Maya's calm courtroom reveal went viral. Social media exploded. #Maya Franklin trended across platforms, sparking fierce debate. For every voice calling it an honest mistake, 10 more shouted that it was proof of systemic bias and unchecked policing. Maya didn't bask in the attention. She gave one brief statement outside the courthouse. "This isn't about me. It's about accountability for everyone." But behind the scenes, the story took root. Editorials, civil rights groups, and even state senators chimed in. What began as a wrongful arrest now burned like wildfire across the country. And Officer Travis Dalton, he couldn't hide, not from the press, the public, or what was coming next. Internal Affairs closes in inside the sterile walls of the department's disciplinary wing. Officer Travis Dalton sat stone-faced, but the confidence he once wore like armor had cracked. Across from him sat 2 Internal Affairs agents, folders thick with past complaints. "This isn't your first profiling incident," one said flatly, "but it might be your last." For years, Travis had skated by justified stops, dismissed claims, a few reprimands buried in bureaucracy, but now there was no hiding behind procedure. He had arrested a federal official on record in front of witnesses with no probable cause. Evidence was reviewed, dashcam footage dissected, and Maya's formal complaint submitted with legal precision. She wasn't seeking vengeance. She wanted precedent. This wasn't personal, it was professional. The review board convened, officers whispered, leadership panicked, and Travis, he realized too late, justice didn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wore heels, held a badge of its own, and spoke with calm fury in the language of law. From injustice to impact, Maya Franklin didn't let the moment fade. She turned her experience into a movement. Days after the incident, she held a press conference, poised, composed, and backed by a coalition of legal minds, civil rights activists, and community leaders. "This is not about ego," she said firmly. "It's about exposure. If this can happen to someone like me, imagine what happens daily to those without a badge, a title, or a platform." She initiated a task force focused on biased policing, leveraging her connections in the Department of Justice. She didn't just want change, she was building it brick by brick. School halls, courtrooms, and police academies began using her case as a case study. Policy began to shift. Training manuals were rewritten. The arrest meant to humiliate her had instead ignited reform. Maya had turned a moment of injustice into an unstoppable mission. What was supposed to break her credibility ended up sharpening her sword. When prejudice meets power for Officer Travis Dalton, the world had shifted. His suspension became indefinite. The department's press release was cold and clear: violation of protocol and professional conduct under investigation. He had misjudged, mistreated, and mishandled a woman he thought was powerless, only to discover she was everything he feared: informed, respected, and legally untouchable. But for Maya, the lesson ran deeper. In a guest lecture at a university law school, she stood before students with fire in her words. "You cannot always control how you're seen," she said, "but you can control how you respond. And sometimes the best response isn't rage, it's results." Officer Dalton's arrogance had met its match, not in anger but in undeniable competence. And in that courtroom weeks ago, he hadn't just arrested the wrong woman, he had unknowingly handcuffed the future of justice. And it walked right past him undefeated. 2/2 in the end. Officer Dalton didn't just arrest the wrong woman, he exposed the wrong system. Because what began with handcuffs and humiliation ended with headlines, hearings, and a legacy of reform. Maya Franklin didn't just walk free, she walked forward, transforming a moment of personal injustice into a movement for collective accountability, and that vague call that set everything into motion. It became the perfect book, and because the story didn't start with power, it started with prejudice, and it ended when that same prejudice was forced to face the truth, standing tall in a courtroom, armed not with anger, but with law, legacy, and unwavering grace. Justice wasn't just served, it walked in wearing heels, carrying a federal badge, and reminding the world that power doesn't always come from a uniform. Sometimes it wears the handcuffs first.